for February the 8th. Like to call the meeting to order. Is there any declarations from any members dealing with conflict or pecuniary interests? Not seeing any. I will move to the minutes of the previous meeting, which I don't believe we actually have, because I think that was approved at the last time. So the first item on the one is called Enterprise Electronic Forms. It's a service report in front of you. It's item number 1. Report number 292018. I will ask at this point in time for the chief or somebody designated to take us through the documentation. If I can have a mover to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Member Bonham, seconded by Member Caslin. Chief, over to you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn to Director at School, and he can walk us through it.
Thank you, Chief. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is really the formal report, Mr. Chair. We did provide a verbal update at the last committee meeting, and this is really the formal report to seek permission from the board to proceed with the award of the purchase agreement of the product Nintex for the implementation of the electronic enterprise forms. In summary, this project replaces a lot of the internal, not external, static forms that are very static. We're looking to implement the electronic forms with intelligent workflow and to increase the efficiencies and eliminate a lot of the manual work we do today. This is really this report in front of you for that approval.
Are you going to put anything up on the screen as to examples of what these forms might look like, or is that not part of this?
No, it's not part of this.
Okay.
What we'll do is, if the board wishes, we can bring back a template, but we haven't. I wasn't aware that we needed to do one. So if
no, that's fine. I wasn't totally aware. I saw the screens coming up. I thought we might be having some type of a presentation, but that's fine.
That's for the next item that's on the agenda.
Board members, questions? Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I guess, to or through the Chief. With this agreement, $85,000 US, is that a one-time purchase, or is there going to be, is it an annual cost?
Yeah. So this is for the capital purchase, and there is an annual maintenance fee with the agreement. And I have Kathy, who can speak to it as well, but what is the maintenance agreement?
It's the software assurance.
What number? So the software assurance, if you look into in the proposal under the cost, there's an annual maintenance will be coming in 2019 for the amount of $16,000 US. So it does include the capital cost, 1-year maintenance, and then 4 hours of professional services.
So that's the $85,000, and then in 2019, well, I guess but is this going to be implemented right away?
Yes, we're
So
looking
in
to
other
implement
words,
it in
12 months from now, we've got another bill of $16,000,
which is an
and
annual.
each year after that?
Correct.
Okay. And you said this was replacing a static system. Was there any software there that the licenses may be ending on that this is being replaced with, or is this just additional?
No, the software we have is end of life, and there's no annual maintenance. It's just we're using it as is.
Okay, thank you.
Member Caslin.
Just a process question. Why do we quote things in U.S. dollars? We don't pay in U.S. dollars, do we?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question? Sorry.
Why do we quote dollar amounts in U.S.? Do we pay in U.S.?
Yes, so when we do the entry in the EFMS system, we'll enter it as a U.S. currency, and there's a conversion happens within the system that converts it to Canadian, but they have to pay the vendor in U.S., and we have some transactions where the region will issue a U.S. check to the vendor.
Okay, I guess the variable is the exchange rate at the time of purchase. Thank you.
Member Bonham?
Yes, my understanding of what this is going to deliver is enhanced movement of work requisitions and that sort of stuff? Is that what we're talking about here? So that we're not moving them from office to office by inter-office mail or something like that. It's all going to go electronically and signatures will be required, and it generally will expedite the laborious nature of some of the acquisition stuff we do. Is that the Coles Notes version of what we're getting here? And if that's the case, given some bad experience I've had, is this going to provide defaults so that if it ends up in somebody's inbox on a screen, that over time that's going to time out and it'll go to the next person, so that people off unexpectedly or on vacation or whatever are not going to be holding up the system? Because if that's the case, then maybe we're not going to get as much benefit out of it as anticipated. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly what we're hoping to achieve through this, is to expedite processes. There's a lot of people that touch sort of the static memorandums or different documents that we have within our current system. It creates lags and gaps, and we've been reaching out to other police agencies who have leveraged this technology, and we're learning from their mistakes and their and including what you've just mentioned there, so that we can so that things don't fall into that that big giant gray hole, and nobody knows where that report has gone because somebody's been off on an extended leave or whatever.
As part of this process, I take it we've examined internally what the stops and checks and balances are, and out of that, have we identified any that are redundant and therefore don't have to be built into the new system, or are we simply replicating the current stops in a more integrated form? Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's been the first step in the process, is to really look at our business practices and evaluate I forget how many forms, a lot of forms that we have, and to see whether or not they still need to be carried over into this electronic format. And we've been able to identify a number of those forms that are redundant, and what will go forward are just the ones that are required.
Thank you.
Just a few questions then on this. Are we still circulating within the service pieces of paper that are actually signed in writing? Does that still exist? Unfortunately,
yes. Lots of them.
Does this go a long way to trying to eliminate 99%?
I don't know about 99%, but we're optimistic that it will relieve a lot of those hand-bombed documents throughout the organization. Annual leave submission forms is the one that is my pet peeve, because it goes through an awful lot of hands, and it's every single member in the organization that submits it, and they have to go through all the different levels of sign-off through supervisors. It is a very tedious and long process, and we're hoping that among many other documents will be streamlined through this process.
So that's 1,200 sheets of paper minimum, if not a few others, because somebody makes a mistake, throws it out, and we start over.
And sometimes they change their leave midway through it, and so there's it's a very time-consuming process.
Just as an aside then, I'll use that as an example. Will that form tie into some of the discussions we've had trying to improve the, what I call the attendance management of the service? Would that form automatically populate some of that electronically, or does it still require a sort of even though it's electronic, you still have to sort of almost rekey it on two screens to get it into additional systems?
So through you, Chair, that's exactly what we're hoping to achieve through that as well, through the HRIS software program that Inspector James Mackay is championing, so that information, in particular leave schedules, court dates that are in the system as well, and any major events are pre-populated, so that again we have that much greater situational awareness, and more importantly, you do data entry once, and you don't have to keep doing it multiple times.
Okay, and I'll ask, just because I usually do, the province's PKI system, which is rolled out to the OPP and available to us, which did provide electronic signatures in electronic form, date stamping and et cetera. I'm assuming you went down that road and looked at what sort of options were there and whether that fitted into any of the models that you were developing internally?
We haven't gone down the path for the internal process. And what I mean by that is the PKI system that was launched through the Government of Canada, where the RCMP issued certificate authorities, was really intended for authentication of confidential exchange between multiple agencies, so the user is authenticated and it's not altered. For this process, we're focusing extensively on the internal forms only. There's be no exchange with other government agencies. And when we talk to York Police and other York and Waterloo, the electronic signature can be based on your badge number and name, and that is sufficient for the internal process. If we have to exchange information with other government agencies like the OPP, then definitely the PKI, which we already have that in place, will be implemented. Okay. But we currently do that with the OPP and with the JPs, where that is issued by the OPP, is installed internally here, and then that exchange is actually done through that certificate, the PKI certificate, but not for the internal process.
Okay, thank you. I implemented the JP system. I appreciate that. Unless there's any other questions from members of the board or of a service on this, then I would show of hands approval of proceeding with this purchase. Thank you. That concludes item number 1. Number 2 on the agenda is the Niagara's ortho photography process. It's a partner application. If I remember, the dollar amount of a service was, I think, $7,500. A mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Member Gale, seconded by Member Stewart. I'll turn this over again to the chief to provide input on or provide background information on this, or his designate.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Escool to provide some further background. The report's quite inclusive, but I'll let him top up on it.
I'll be quite quick. So back in 2014, we went to the board and we signed. We participated with the region for the ortho imagery back then. The cost was at that time was $30,000 plus tax, and that was the RPS share of the overall capital project between the region, the 12 municipalities, and Niagara Police. That agreement has since expired in 2017. It doesn't restrict us from using the old ortho imagery. The region is undertaking another capital project in 2018 to refresh the regional maps. We are continuing our participation. The cost is very good, with respect to $7,600, and I believe the region is looking to award to a proponent to do the flyover, I believe in April or May. And then when the data has been vetted and cleaned, it will be offered to us to refresh our current mapping system.
Questions from board members? Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I'm just trying to understand the costs of this, because on the first page, talks about a cost-sharing contribution of $30,000. And then we're talking about $7,500. Is the $30,000 the total cost for all partners, and we anticipate being one of 4 partners? Is that how we arrive at that, or?
So the initial $30,000 was just provided to the board as a background on that what happened back in June 2014. That was prorated based on multi-tier governments. So we're viewed as a 1 tier because we're regional, versus a 2nd tier like a St. Catharines, for example. When the region and the committee looked at the cost for the capital, they've decided to establish a 1 cost module across the board. So that's $7,600 based on that one-tier pricing, because they're looking to also invite other agencies to participate in the funding. But the region is the actual capital funder, and we're just contributing to that project.
So the 7,500 is fixed for us?
It's fixed, yes. It actually could go lower if we get more agencies to contribute to that capital project. So, but this is the maximum dollar amount. It's not going to go up.
Thank you.
Member Bonham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering what specifically this does for policing. Thank you.
Yeah, I can provide a couple of points. So, as you are aware, the region, is constantly changing, and the topology and the landscape of the region changes. So, this is really to give us an up-to-date imagery of the region. We use a lot of that for our in our 911 system. So, we update our maps in the community area dispatch system. The maps are also updated in the cruisers, which officers are using to potentially look at a scene. Our tactical units use it for preparing for warrant, search warrant, or dealing with a situation. It is also heavily used for providing court documents to assist detectives and the crowns, as they want to take a look at what I call a real-life image, as if they're there. So this is really supporting the operation. It supports our court submission system and also in investigations, and also for tactical and search and rescue. So when you go into a heavy wooded area, it allows our search and rescue teams to kind of take a look at it and position the appropriate resources to conduct the rescue in a quicker manner than having to look at a standard map. So this enhances our police operations. So as we dig deeper, look at heat maps, it also enhances that because it allows us to have multiple layers of the map. And also, I mean, what our tactical or search and rescue, they have other search tools. So this allows them to overlay their tracking system with the mapping or up-to-date mapping, so they can, again, as I mentioned earlier, they can actually find the person who's disoriented or lost in a much quicker way in condensed or dense areas, and has been proven to be very successful in many rescues. Also the waterways as well, so it helps look at the waterways as well.
So I'm taking this has been done once at least, and we're interested in a renewal of the effort for the purposes you've outlined?
Yeah, in 2013 we had the same thing, and this is just refreshing that, absolutely. So it is in place.
Is the frequency event driven? In other words, we know there's been substantial changes, so there's a reason to go out and redo this, or is it just on a turn up that we do this every 4 or 5 years or whatever? Thank you.
I think the region chose to do the changes every 4 years, so every 4 years they go refresh it. It's quite expensive to do it every year because they have to actually hire a plane and a pilot and do that. So the municipal group with the region and us, we're satisfied that it is adequate every 4 years.
Thank you.
I have a few questions on this. You mentioned something about overlays. Having been involved in a similar process to this in my previous life, are you in different layers? Are you providing, for example, the gas pipeline that comes through the region, the emergency response map for the Niagara District Airport as an example, the location of railway lines, et cetera, power lines, anything else that would assist us as an emergency service in response? Are those additional layers that you have added?
I'll have to get back to you. I know we use some of the layers to the extent where we actually go how deep in the sewer, for example, and those assets. I'll have to get back to you. I'll have to speak to our GIS specialist. I know we've talked about it from an RTOC perspective. It's beneficial to actually have those assets added. But I'll have to get back to you on that to see to the extent of the layers we use today.
I mean, I could see key infrastructure assets being added, of which we as a police service would end up, quote, being responded to as a, quote, first responder. So, I mean, I'll use railway accidents, issues at Niagara District Airport. I mean, these were all in place, dating myself, 25 years ago. And that's when we had a very active Emergency Management Ontario group at the region. And it was somebody designated within the service that was the liaison with that. And even back in the day, there were even simulated drills. I think they're still done to this day. They may go under the guise of, quote, terrorist preparations, et cetera, and I'm not going to delve into operational matters. But I would like to hear back from the service as to, this is a vital tool. You touched on it in wooded areas for search and rescue, or for a criminal event that's taking place. So I think it's a good move on our service. My second point to that is this map information available in the comm center? Like, can they pull that up as an overlay underneath the existing map? I see a nod from the chief. So.
Through you, that's correct, Mr. Chair. And with regards to the overlay of mapping, you can imagine at the region, with all of the various departments that they have, there would be a multitude of layers, whether it's public health or public works, and so a lot of those layers may be of interest to us, but a lot of them would not necessarily apply to a policing component. So
I would think it's probably 5 or 6 at the most.
Sure. But we'll have Akram look into that further and provide some further information as to what layers we are using from the region.
And the final question dealing with this is this information distributed to our mobile workstations? So an officer in the field who is first on the scene, we've got a missing person in a woods in Wainfleet or somewhere like that. Somebody ends up being the coordinator on that scene. Does he have access to these maps and say, well, there's a stream, but it's 2 kilometers on the other side, we need to get a car around there, whatever the case is?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. That information is provided out to the mobile workstations, and it really assists, for example, we have a containment situation where we have to set up perimeters. It really provides the patrol sergeant who's overseeing and responsible for setting up those the containment, an overview of where the officers are going to be situated, and as well with the GPS that we have in the vehicles, it allows us to be able to coordinate on the map where vehicles are situated as well.
Okay. Well worth the expenditure, and a very good application to make use of this type of technology, and I certainly concur with refreshing on a fairly regular basis just due to tree growth and other changes that take place in the region.
Particularly in light of all of the development that's going on throughout the region and different subdivisions and whatnot that 4 years ago were not on the maps that we currently have. So it's a good opportunity to refresh.
And the region is keeping us up to date on new streets being added and names and all of that, and that's dovetailing back into our CAD system?
That is correct, and we do regular street updates, I believe monthly or as required for the 911 system. So as new streets are added, we add them in CAD, and it can happen once a month or as frequent as we feel is appropriate. But definitely, we have an excellent relationship with the region, and we do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any additional, Member Bonham?
Just one thought on that. With regard to existing streets, I mean, this mapping would show a street that exists today that existed 10 years ago. What would it, like, I guess there's nothing in it that, let's say the name of the street's changed. Does that come into this at all, or like it's still what it was and it is today, and it may exist as a street 20 years from now, but if the name of the street's been changed, how does that get entered into our database so that we're not sending somebody looking for a street address for a street that's been renamed? How does that happen?
So I think the best example of that is St. David's Road up in Thorold, which has now, a portion of it has been renamed Sir Isaac Brock Boulevard, I believe is the official name now. So that information gets entered into the system through region, and then that information is provided to us and is downloaded into our CAD system.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're approving the motion to David as the committee approves the participant agreement in front of us, which is dated January the 12th between the Region of Municipality of Niagara and the Niagara Regional Police Service. And further, we're authorizing the chief of police or his designate to authorize and execute the required documentation. So all in favor of that? Thank you. That motion is carried. Any new business from the service?
Not for public, thank you.
Okay. Any items from the Police Services Board of new business? So we're going to adjourn this meeting at this point in time, and we will then move into a confidential component of technology, and it'll take us about 5 minutes or so to switch over.